was born in Kenya, grew up in Nairobi, and your family immigrated to England in 1962. All those changes in your life, do you think have they like affect you?
I've experienced three very definite cultures which are actually very, very different from each other. The first 10 years in Africa were very formative in many ways, and I think that the strongest aspect of those 10 years was the connection I began to make with what I call the materiality of the earth. The physical nature of the contact with the soil, with the natural elements. And I think probably my love of wood probably originates from those days. The Indian side again is very different because it opened up like a different way of looking at things. Nothing is straightforward, there's meaning within meaning within meaning. It depends how deep you want to go, which I think reflects in quite a lot of the work which I do. I think one of you was talking about that figure upstairs in the bedroom, woman or whatever it is, opening herself up, and it looks like she's opening her coat. But actually it's the slit goes right through the face. So it's exploring those kind of ideas, what is a human being, what is a person, what's my identity? And I think it was probably quite a lot to do with the Indian heritage, which in some ways has made me realise that and made me aware of it. And also made me realise that there is no such thing as one truth. Truth depends on where you stand. To sum up, really, I feel I belong everywhere, but I don't really belong anywhere. I don't think England's my home, I don't think Africa's my home, I don't think India's my home. That home probably is in my head somewhere, and I take it with me wherever I go. If you are the thinking sort of person, then you will actually, it's worth asking yourself those questions, because it can only just give you richness and different perspectives, It can affect what you do for the better, make your life a lot richer. There is no English artist that I know who does work like I do. My work is a reflection of the different experiences I've had. It's to do with those things which are common to humanity, irregardless of where you come from, what race you are. If someone from the depths of Africa or the North Pole saw a piece of my sculpture, they'd find meaning in it.
I've noticed that you use like 3 different materials to do your sculptures: wood, stone and bronze. Any specific reason why those materials were chosen?
It's slightly difficult to answer this question because I'm not a trained artist. I didn't go to art college or anything like that. I'll tell you a fact which is absolutely true. I failed my GCE O-level art at school. But the funny thing is, while I was failing my O-level art, I was actually painting at home. And some of those paintings were being shown in the South London Art Gallery. And then I went to university and I didn't do art or anything like that. I did something completely different. But I kept painting all the way through simply because I found it absolutely fascinating. And it's only since I left university that I started sculpting. And at that time I was working with a community arts workshop, which was a new idea in those days, working with young children and things. And we had this old railway engine shed as our base. And this place had loads of railway sleepers lying around. Some of the kids suggested, why don't we use some of these sleepers to make a nice fence around our play area and paint nice things on them. And then someone said, we could carve some things on them as well. And we thought that was a great idea, except no one knew anything about carving. So I started looking at books and things, and strangely enough, about the only kind of things I could look at that time, which made any sense to me, was to look at African and tribal artwork, because their attitude was the same. They were using materials which were lying around, and wood was commonly available. So we used some of these railway sleepers and started carving things on them and then painting them. And that's how I actually started accidentally working on sculpture. And then I started about 18 years ago. I went off to Malta for a holiday, and I found all this beautiful stone lying around. And everyone was saying, you can carve the stone dead easily, because it's soft limestone. And I started my first carving then. Eventually we bought a derelict house there, and now it's all done up and I've got a proper studio there, so every time I go there I work in my studio there on stone. So that's how stone came into it. And I found the stone actually like a nice interesting departure from wood, because, well, what do you think takes longer to work on, stone or wood?
Stone.
Yeah, everyone thinks that.
Wood.
But wood, yeah, I mean stone is a lot quicker. It's still slow, but it's relatively a lot quicker because you can hack out big bits. And the stone, you see, you only need about 3 or 4 tools. Obviously, if the stone's like granite, really hard, then it's more time consuming. But with wood, you see, it's much harder in a way. You can only knock out little chips. And your tools need to be a lot sharper, and you need lots of different kinds of tools, etc. But with stone, I found that I could actually explore different kinds of shapes, which I couldn't in wood. And then, a few years ago, someone wanted to buy a piece of mine, which I did not want to sell. And that's when I'm thinking about maybe casting it in bronze, so this person could have it. And he was happy with that. So, and then I started thinking, well, actually, quite a bit of this work would cast really well in bronze. It also means that I can do small additions of 5 or 9.
Would you consider working into a new material, like clay or metal?
Metal, not really, because you need to get into welding and all that, you know, it's like a whole new technique which doesn't really grab me, you know. I mean, I'm quite happy using found bits of metal and incorporate them into my work. Clay I worked with, I mean, I've still got, you know, a few bits of ceramics which I did many, many years ago, including what's left of this pot here.
Are the pieces you do dependent on the materials you use?
Your starting point is actually working out ideas on paper or in your head and then translating them into paper as to what you can do with that block of wood. And it shows it. That sort of idea is completely different from this piece of sculpture here, which is a very organic piece of wood. You couldn't do that out of a block of wood which is absolutely neat, because you'd never be able to think of an idea like that. So if I'm working with material where there's a lot of element of design, then it's going to result in a different kind of work than, say, something like that where I've got a piece of wood which has got a lot of movement in it already. And it's almost like you're working with something which is half given and you're seeking to transform it and to give it meaning. Then it's bound to result in a completely different piece of kind of work. Similarly with that man standing on that book. Now that is completely from my head. It wasn't given by the wood. So really a lot of my work actually is dependent on the relationship I develop with the wood I work with.
Most of your sculptures pieces use like women as your inspiration, white women.
I think the female form, it's quite a complicated issue. I mean, the male form is quite interesting as well, but I'm particularly attracted to the female form because it speaks to me in so many different ways. The fact, and this also connects with the whole notions of fertility. I mean, the woman, the mother, is the source of life, really. Okay? And in Indian religion, or certain form of Hinduism, particularly something called Tantra, the female form is the essence of creativity. It's like, it's through the female form that life is poured out. It's constantly giving birth. So, I mean, you know, not just in terms of human forms, but even in a very cosmic sort of scale, like the planets and the stars, anything which is creative is being born. And the woman, actually, the female element, is the one which is giving the birth. You need the male element as well. And also in Hinduism, and quite a few other primitive religions, actually, there's very strong belief that the creative aspect in humanity is the female principle married with the male principle. The feminine intuition, sensibility, these are all very important things. I find the female form capable of expressing a lot more of the kind of emotions and feelings which I'm interested in than a man does, you know, because I'm more interested in the more sort of subtle and almost subliminal, you know, which is unconscious, mysterious elements of life, rather than the zap, I'm here, male kind of things, you know. The woman reminds me of hills as well, you know, because I love hills, mountains and hills. The contours, you know. I mean, the female contours, I think, the form is just much more suggestive of so many things which the male form isn't. Say if you look at the Hindu temples, the stone carvings and places like Mohenjo-daro, which is the really ancient civilization, a lot of the forms are female forms. Fertility has always been very, very important in civilization, and actually it's been the roots of a lot of so many different cultures. The mother figure is really, really important in a lot of primitive art, more than the ancestral male figure. There seems to be more to explore with the female form. You know, you can do so much more with it. You can suggest so much more. With the male form, it's difficult.
Do you always use sort of, like, as we can see here, like the hand tools? Or do you use power tools and like bigger?
I've got a chainsaw there. I mean, behind there, and I used to have a really big one as well. I mean, I've done some really big things, some of which are in Birmingham in public places. You know, sort of sculptures as tall as the roof here, with huge bits of trees. And when you're working at that sort of scale, you know, you'd be spending half of your life just working, tapping away. That is a maquette. It's a model of a piece which was about 9, 10, well, about 2.5 meters tall, which is in Birmingham somewhere, made out of just one huge piece of wood, exactly the same wood, which is cedar of Lebanon. The reason I did that was to be able to show to Birmingham City Council and people who were commissioning it what the piece would look like. I knew where to cut the wood with a chainsaw to reduce it down to this kind of basic shape. It cuts out the time, you see. I was working on a huge piece of oak with the biggest chisels, you know, 2-inch wide chisels with the heaviest of the mallets, spending day after day just swinging like that, and my arm just went. And someone suggested, look, I mean, why do you do that? You know, why don't you just get one of these things? And it's got a series of blades. These are tungsten tipped, very sharp. And it's basically an angle grinder, and this thing goes round, and you just guide it along, and it just takes out the wood, but with a lot less effort, because you're not swinging your arm around. You just get stiff shoulders. So I'm not adverse to using machines when they help me. But having said that, most of the work is done by hand. You've got control. It's essentially all handwork.
Most of your work's displayed in different areas. Wouldn't you like to know where they are? Because you know sometimes you don't really know where your work is. Because when I make something, I like to always know it's by me, so I can say I made this and that. So now you know that certain sculptures in certain places. How would you feel if you couldn't see them again?
You have to get used to it. When I first started sculpting, I used to have everything around me. They were like my family. And those early works are still important. Unfortunately, I've got most of them. I got to a certain point after a few years when I realised that this is what I wanted to do with my life. That I'd never thought of myself as an artist. I just fell into wood sculpture. And then after a few years, you just realise that that's what you do. And, you know, you got bills to pay. You got a living to earn. And for many years I used to do odd jobs, you know, to subsidise what I was doing. But then the time comes when you have to start selling your stuff. And it's a painful experience to begin with. You learn to just hang on to a few pieces, which, when you only got half a dozen pieces or 10 pieces, everything's really important. When you've got 100, you can't feel the same about all of them. I've sold about 200 pieces in my life so far, and I've probably still got about 150, you know. And out of those 150, there are probably about 20, you know, which are really, well, 15, which are really important to me. And out of those 15, there's probably no more than 5 or 6, which I'd never sell. you also get used to the idea that, okay, someone likes your work enough to buy it, and it's giving them pleasure, you know. So you get used to the idea. And I've got work in America, I've got work all over the place. I don't even know what the people look like who bought it, you know. So
you have images of those, though, so you know that you...
yeah, I always photograph everything I've done. So there's always a record of the work.
Some of your pieces are to do with like biblical stories and that. Why is that?
I actually know a lot about the Bible simply because the boarding school I was at in India was a Christian boarding school, but religion was absolutely hammered down our throats, and you had to learn things by heart, chunks of the Bible, and if you didn't get it right, you were caned. So I know quite a lot about the Bible and the stories and things like that. But the other reason actually is simply to do with the fact that some of the stories are very interesting myths. Like the one, Jacob's dream you were asking me about, which is in the sitting room with the ladder growing out of the man. The myth is that Jacob was in the desert and he fell asleep and he dreamt of this golden ladder rising up to heaven. But I've always found it a bit of a con, really. It's like saying, be content with your lot on earth, because if you live the good Christian life, you'll be rewarded in heaven, and you can go up this ladder. So that sculpture, it's called Jacob's dream, because there's Jacob sort of looking up at the heaven of this ladder, but the ladder is like an old wreck, and there's no way you could climb up it.